Chapter 1: The Discovery. In a quaint village nestled in the rolling hills of the countryside, 12-year-old Sophie lived with her parents and her beloved grandmother, Grandma Rose. Sophie was a curious and spirited girl with chestnut hair and bright blue eyes that sparkled with a love for adventure. She especially loved spending time with Grandma Rose, who had a magical way of turning everyday moments into unforgettable memories. One rainy afternoon, Sophie and Grandma Rose were in the kitchen, the heart of their cozy home. The kitchen was filled with the comforting aroma of freshly baked bread, and the sound of the rain tapping on the windows created a soothing symphony. "Sophie, my dear, would you like to help me make something special today?" Grandma Rose asked, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Of course, Grandma. What are we making?" Sophie replied eagerly, always ready for a new culinary adventure. Grandma Rose reached into a drawer and pulled out a worn, leather-bound notebook. Its pages were yellowed with age, and the cover was embossed with intricate floral patterns. "This, Sophie, is my secret recipe book. It's been passed down through generations, and it holds some of the most cherished recipes of our family." Sophie gasped in awe. She had heard stories about the secret recipe book, but had never seen it. "Wow, Grandma! What's the recipe we're going to make?" Grandma Rose smiled and opened the book to a page with a faded, handwritten recipe titled Enchanted Apple Pie. "This apple pie is very special, Sophie. It's said to bring happiness and good fortune to those who share it." Sophie could hardly contain her excitement as they gathered the ingredients: fresh apples from their orchard, cinnamon, nutmeg, sugar, butter, and a few secret spices that Grandma Rose carefully measured out. As they worked together, Grandma Rose shared stories of her own childhood and the many times she had made the enchanted pie with her mother. Chapter 2: The Preparation. Sophie and Grandma Rose spent the afternoon preparing the pie. They peeled and sliced the apples, mixed them with the spices, and rolled out the dough. Grandma Rose showed Sophie how to create a beautiful lattice pattern on the top crust, explaining that the design was a family tradition. "Every time we make this pie, we weave love and memories into the crust," Grandma Rose said, her hands skillfully crisscrossing the dough strips. As the pie baked in the oven, filling the kitchen with its mouth-watering aroma, Sophie and Grandma Rose sat down at the kitchen table with a pot of tea. Grandma Rose shared more stories from the past, and Sophie listened intently, feeling a deep connection to her family's history. When the pie was finally ready, they took it out of the oven and let it cool. Grandma Rose cut a slice and handed it to Sophie. "Here you go, my dear. The first slice is always the most special." Sophie took a bite, and her eyes widened in delight. "This is the best pie I've ever tasted, Grandma. It's like a taste of magic." Grandma Rose chuckled. "That's because it's made with love and a little bit of our family's special magic." Chapter 3: The Invitation. A few days later, Sophie received an invitation from her school for a bake-off competition. The event was to be held at the village fair, and students were encouraged to enter their best homemade desserts. Sophie immediately thought of the enchanted apple pie. "Grandma, can we enter the bake-off with your secret recipe?" Sophie asked, her eyes shining with excitement. Grandma Rose smiled warmly. "Of course, Sophie. But remember, the secret to our pie isn't just the ingredients. It's the love and care we put into making it." Sophie nodded, understanding the importance of their family's tradition. They spent the next few days perfecting the recipe, making several pies, and sharing them with neighbors and friends. Each time they made the pie, Sophie felt more connected to her grandmother and their shared heritage. On the day of the bake-off, the village fair was bustling with activity. Colorful stalls lined the village green, and the air was filled with laughter and the scent of delicious food. Sophie and Grandma Rose set up their table, proudly displaying their enchanted apple pie. Chapter 4: The Bake-Off. As the bake-off began, Sophie felt a mix of excitement and nerves. The judges, a panel of local chefs and bakers, made their rounds, tasting each dessert and asking questions. When they reached Sophie's table, she took a deep breath and presented their pie with a smile. "This is our enchanted apple pie," Sophie explained. "It's a special family recipe that's been passed down through generations." The judges took a bite, and their faces lit up with delight. "This is truly exceptional, Sophie," one of the judges said. "The flavors are perfectly balanced, and the crust is beautifully crafted. You've done an amazing job." Sophie beamed with pride as she looked at Grandma Rose, who gave her an encouraging nod. "Thank you," Sophie replied. "I'm so glad you like it." As the judges moved on to the next table, Sophie and Grandma Rose shared a hug. "No matter what happens, I'm so proud of you, Sophie," Grandma Rose said. "You've honored our family tradition in the best way possible." After all the desserts had been tasted, the judges gathered to deliberate. The anticipation in the air was palpable as the participants and spectators waited for the results. Finally, the head judge stepped forward with a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for participating in this year's bake-off. We were truly impressed by the talent and creativity displayed today. It was a tough decision, but we're pleased to announce that the winner of the bake-off is Sophie and her enchanted apple pie." The crowd erupted in applause as Sophie and Grandma Rose were called to the stage. Sophie felt a rush of joy and pride as she accepted the trophy, knowing that she had not only won the competition but also honored her family's legacy. Chapter 5: Sharing the Magic. In the days following the bake-off, Sophie and Grandma Rose received numerous requests for their enchanted apple pie recipe. They decided to host a baking workshop at their home, inviting neighbors and friends to learn how to make the pie and share in the magic. The workshop was a huge success. People from all over the village came to learn from Grandma Rose and Sophie. They peeled and sliced apples, mixed spices, and rolled out dough, just as Sophie and her grandmother had done so many times before. The kitchen was filled with laughter and the sweet aroma of baking pies. As they worked, Grandma Rose shared stories of their family's history and the significance of the enchanted pie. "This pie is more than just a dessert," she explained. "It's a symbol of love, tradition, and the connections that bind us together." Sophie watched with pride as her grandmother taught their neighbors the art of pie making. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that they were spreading happiness and creating new memories with their cherished recipe. One evening, after the last workshop had ended and the kitchen was quiet, Grandma Rose handed Sophie the secret recipe book. "This belongs to you now, Sophie," she said, her eyes filled with love. "It's your turn to carry on our family's tradition and share the magic with others." Sophie hugged her grandmother tightly. "Thank you, Grandma. I promise to keep our tradition alive and continue sharing the magic of our enchanted pie." Chapter 6: A New Beginning. As the seasons changed, Sophie and Grandma Rose continued to make their enchanted apple pie, sharing it with friends, family, and neighbors. The recipe became a cherished part of the village's culinary heritage, and Sophie felt a deep sense of pride in her family's legacy. One day, as Sophie was flipping through the secret recipe book, she noticed a blank page at the end. She turned to Grandma Rose with a curious look. "Grandma, why is there a blank page in the book?" Grandma Rose smiled knowingly. "That page is for you, Sophie. It's for you to add your own special recipe, one that you can pass down to future generations." Sophie felt a surge of excitement and inspiration. She had learned so much from her grandmother and was eager to create her own unique recipe to add to their family's collection. Over the next few weeks, Sophie experimented with different ingredients and flavors, drawing on the knowledge and skills she had gained from Grandma Rose. She finally settled on a recipe for a spiced pear tart, a delicious dessert that combined the warmth of cinnamon and nutmeg with the sweetness of ripe pears. With Grandma Rose's guidance, Sophie perfected her spiced pear tart recipe and wrote it down in the secret recipe book, right next to the enchanted apple pie. She felt a deep sense of accomplishment, knowing that she was contributing to her family's legacy and creating something special to pass on to future generations. Chapter 7: The Legacy Continues. As the years went by, Sophie grew older and eventually had children of her own. She continued to make the enchanted apple pie and spiced pear tart, sharing the recipes and the stories behind them with her family. The kitchen remained the heart of their home, a place where love, laughter, and memories were woven into every dish. Sophie often thought back to the rainy afternoon when she first discovered the secret recipe book and the magical journey it had taken her on. She felt grateful for the lessons and traditions her grandmother had passed down to her and was determined to keep those traditions alive. One sunny afternoon, as Sophie and her children were baking together, she handed the secret recipe book to her eldest daughter, Emily. "This book has been in our family for generations, and now it's your turn to carry on our traditions," Sophie said, her eyes filled with love. Emily looked at the book with awe and reverence. "Thank you, Mom. I promise to honor our family's recipes and continue sharing the magic with others." Sophie smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She knew that the legacy of their family's enchanted recipes would continue to bring happiness and good fortune to future generations. Epilogue: The Power of Tradition. Sophie and her family continued to share their enchanted recipes with friends, neighbors, and the community. The village bake-off became an annual tradition, and Sophie's enchanted apple pie and spiced pear tart were always among the most anticipated entries. The secret recipe book grew thicker over the years, filled with new recipes and stories from each generation. It became a symbol of the enduring power of love, tradition, and the connections that bind us together. As Sophie watched her children and grandchildren carry on their family's culinary legacy, she felt a deep sense of pride and joy. She knew that the magic of their enchanted recipes would continue to bring happiness and good fortune to all who shared in their delicious creations. And so, the story of Grandma's secret recipe lived on, a testament to the power of family, tradition, and the simple joy of baking together. The enchanted apple pie and spiced pear tart remained beloved staples of the village's culinary heritage, a sweet reminder of the love and magic that had been passed down through generations. In the end, it was not just the recipes themselves that held the magic, but the love, memories, and connections that were woven into every slice. And that was a legacy worth preserving for all time.